Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating, incredibly high-stakes story from the Dhammapada. It's a text that perfectly captures that universal, everyday struggle of human willpower against our own overwhelming desires. We're going to look at two drastically different approaches to life and see what this ancient wisdom can teach us about building true, unshakable resilience in our own modern minds. So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Think about your everyday life. When the winds of emotional turmoil, or say the constant pinging of modern distractions, really start to blow, do you stand your ground or are you easily uprooted? We've all been there, right? Whether it's an unhealthy habit, an emotional overreaction, or just the endless magnetic pull of your smartphone. The real question is, what actually happens to your foundation when those winds start howling? Part 1. The Weep Tree. Okay, let's look at Dhammapada verse 7. It describes a very specific type of person, someone who's basically running on autopilot. It talks about someone who constantly chases sensual beauty, who lives with their senses completely unguarded, and who has absolutely zero moderation when it comes to their appetites. The text uses words like languid and indolent, which is really just a polite way of saying they're lazy and lack willpower. Because of this, they're left completely vulnerable to being overthrown by an entity called Mara. They just snap, entirely overpowered, exactly like a weak tree in a violent storm. Picture a gluttonous, undisciplined person just lounging around, completely lost in their own sensory pleasures. Hovering right over their shoulder is this massive, looming skull, a stark reminder of mortality and the destructive force of unchecked desires. Because they haven't built any internal defenses, they're just bending to every single craving. Part 2. The Rocky Mountain. Now, verse 8, this is the antidote. It provides the absolute perfect contrast to that weak tree. It explains that a disciplined person, someone who remains moderate, diligent, and is brave enough to actively contemplate the unglamorous, unpleasant realities of life, well, they develop a profound inner strength. Because their faculties are restrained, those tempting forces simply cannot overthrow them. They stand completely firm against the wind. Think of a serene monk meditating deep in a cave. Outside, temptation, in the form of that same skeletal Mara, is doing everything it can to distract him. But the monk is encased in the solid, unmoving silhouette of a mountain. The wind is whipping around, leaves are flying everywhere, but he doesn't even flinch. He's a firm rock facing the exact same chaos that just destroyed the weak tree. When you lay these traits out side by side, the contrast is just striking. On one side, the weak tree, unrestrained, immoderate, lazy. That is a fast track straight to collapse. On the other side, the Rocky Mountain, well-restrained, moderate, diligent. That path builds a literal fortress of resilience. It really comes down to a clear choice of which foundation we're choosing to lay down every single day through our habits. And to really get this, we have to know what we're actually up against. In these ancient texts, Mara isn't some mythical devil living up in the clouds. Mara represents your very real everyday emotions. It's the modern distractions constantly trying to drag you off your path. Mara is essentially the personification of our own internal impulses, just waiting for a moment of weakness to grab the steering wheel. Part 3. The Tale of Two Brothers. To prove how this works in practice, the texts share a wild story about two brothers whose journeys start together but diverge pretty fast. The sincere older brother, Mahàkàla, hears a discourse from the Buddha, gets incredibly inspired, and becomes a monk. His younger brother, Cholakala, follows suit. But Cholakala has a massive ulterior motive. He is secretly plotting to quit and eventually drag his older brother back to their comfortable worldly life. Part 4. The Ultimate Test. So, here's the climax. The Buddha and his monks are traveling and arrive near the brothers' old hometown. When Kalakala goes ahead to prep some food, his former wives absolutely ambush him. And I mean, literally, they tear off his monastic robes. Just like that, he crumbles. He's totally done. Later that day, the Buddha purposely leaves the older brother, Mahàkàla, behind. Now he has to face an ambush from his own 8 wives, who try to force him back into lay life. But Mahàkàla has actually done the hard internal work. He remains completely steadfast. In fact, in this epic display of his spiritual mastery, he uses psychic powers to rise into the air, completely escapes their grasp, and just flies right back to the Buddha. I mean, talk about passing the test. Part 5. The Buddha's Verdict. This whole crazy sequence perfectly exposes Kalakala as the ultimate weak tree. He was snapped by the very first gust of temptation. When the other monks hear about the ambush, they actually start panicking, thinking Mahàkàla is going to fall too. But the Buddha steps in and shuts that down. He tells them that comparing the two brothers is completely misguided. Mahàkàla had attained the unshakable discipline of an arahat, a fully enlightened being. He had done the real work, while his brother was just playing dress-up. Part 6. Becoming unshakable. So, how do we actually apply this to our lives? We probably aren't meditating in caves or, flying away from our problems using psychic powers, but the underlying psychology is exactly the same. The ancient commentary offers a really brilliant practical solution. It warns us to drop the false optimism, that naive belief that life is just a bed of roses without any thorns. If we only ever focus on the pleasant things, we get hopelessly attached to them. Instead, it suggests we actively recognize the thorns, accept the unpleasant sides of life and the fact that absolutely everything changes and eventually separates from us. By embracing that reality, our heartful desires naturally weaken. We stop clinging so hard, which means we don't crash into deep sorrow when things inevitably shift. We maintain our stability. Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. The next time the overwhelming winds of modern distraction, anger, or temptation blow your way, and trust me, they will, what kind of foundation are you relying on? Will you be the weak tree, easily snapped by the storm? Or are you doing the work to become an unshakable rocky mountain? The choice is entirely up to you.